In around 2300 BC, God destroyed the earth with a flood, saving only his faithful servant Noah, 7 of Noah's family members, and every animal you can think of. The rest of mankind had been wiped out because of their wickedness, and this would be a chance for mankind to begin again with a fresh start. The ideal, of course, would have been for people to live godly lives, treat each other well, and live happily ever after in the post-flood world. Well, that's not the way it happened. The world went right back to chaos, disorder, people treating each other poorly, and turning away from God to worship gods of their own making. Adam and Eve's disobedience in the garden had given, unfortunately, all of mankind a sinful nature. But the Lord had a plan in mind to deal with this problem. There was a city called Ur of the Chaldees, which was in an area that is now part of southern Iraq near the Persian Gulf. Ur is credited with being the first known civilization in the world, a thriving city of roughly 250,000 people. A huge trade center that flourished along the Euphrates River, with craftsmen who made everything from leather goods to priceless jewels. Ur was also a city full of idols, most notably Nana, the god of the moon. But it was from this earthy, sinful metropolis, roughly 10 generations after the flood, that the Lord picked a man named Abram to be the founding father of his chosen nation. Abram was a rancher and shepherd who had married his half-sister Sarai. When he received the initial call from God, in the first of 7 encounters recorded in Genesis, he was 75 years old and Sarai was 65, and they had no children because Sarai was barren. Their father's name was Terah, who was not only a worshiper of idols, but tradition says he was even an idol maker. Now the question is, why did God pick Abram and Sarai to begin his chosen nation? An aging man and his aging barren wife, with an idol-making father and a hometown that worshipped the god of the moon. There was no reason for Abram to know the true God, and nothing he had done to deserve knowing the true God. But the Bible tells us that once he discovered the true God, he persisted in his faith, even though it was a faith that could be very hit and miss. Roughly 2,000 years later, in his letter to the church at Galatia, the Apostle Paul wrote that Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. At the end of Genesis 11, we are told that Terah took Abram, Sarai, and Terah's grandson Lot, and left Ur for Canaan. They stopped about halfway in Haran, which was believed to be in what is now southeastern Turkey, and where Terah eventually died. What follows in the Bible is Abram's call, which sounds like it was received in Haran, and that he, Sarai, and Lot moved on from there to Canaan. But Genesis 12 begins with, "The Lord had said to leave the country," meaning that God had given this call to Abram earlier. And later, the Lord would tell Abram, "I brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees." Approximately 2,000 years later, the early church deacon Stephen would mention Abram receiving the call in Ur. Did Abram receive the call in Ur and then ask his father to go along with them to Canaan? Why would an idol worshiper give a second thought to his son's life-changing calling by an invisible God he didn't believe in? Wherever Abram was standing when he got that initial call, it was a call that led to rich blessings, enormous fame, multiple nations, countless descendants, and an offer of salvation for the entire world.
Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed.
We don't know Abram's reaction to all this. The true God, above all the gods he had ever heard of, giving him a promise on the grandest of scales. Are you sure you picked the right guy? The son of a man who worships the moon god? What we do know is that Abram obeyed, and he, Sarai, his nephew Lot, and all their servants and families went on to Canaan. God had told Abram to leave his family, but for some unexplained reason, he brought Lot along. This was a decision that would bring much trouble in the years to come. Upon arriving in Canaan, they camped at a place near Shechem, which was a commercial center due to its position along vital trade routes. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, I am giving this land to your descendants. Abram built an altar there to commemorate the Lord's visit. Approximately 400 years later, Joshua would make a speech to the Israelites here, where he would ask them who they wanted to serve, the true God or the false gods of their ancestors and enemies. Abram's father Terah is mentioned by name. Abram then traveled southward to what was called the Hilly Country, with the city of Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. There he made camp and an altar to the Lord and prayed to him. Then they continued slowly southward to the Negeb, a desert region about 70 miles wide, pausing frequently. And then what happened in this land that God called Abram to? This land he had traveled over 1,000 miles to in faith and obedience? Nothing less than a nationwide famine. So Abram moved his group down to Egypt. This was another failure for Abram in the faith test. The Lord had called him to go to Canaan, not Egypt. And to top it all off, 6 paragraphs into his story in Genesis 12, he would let his nerves get the best of him and deceive the most powerful man in town.
And it came to pass, when he was come near to enter into Egypt, that he said unto Sarai his wife, Behold, now I know that thou art a fair woman to look upon. And it will come to pass, when the Egyptians shall see thee, that they will say, This is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will save thee alive. Say, I pray thee, thou art my sister, that it may be well with me for thy sake, and that my soul may live because of thee. And it came to pass that when Abram was come into Egypt, the Egyptians beheld the woman, that she was very fair.
Abram assumed the Egyptians would kill him if they knew he was Sarai's husband. The 65-year-old Sarai was so hot that Pharaoh wanted her in his harem, and gave Abram many gifts because of this. But the Lord sent a terrible plague upon Pharaoh's household because of her being there.
And Pharaoh called Abram, and said, What is this that thou hast done unto me? Why didst thou not tell me that she was thy wife? Why saidst thou, She is my sister? So I might have taken her to me to wife. Now therefore, behold thy wife, take her, and go thy way. And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away, and his wife, and all that he had.
So they left Egypt and traveled north into the Negeb. They continued northward toward Bethel, where he had camped before, between Bethel and Ai, to the place where he had built the altar. And here again he worshipped the Lord. Abram and Lot were both very wealthy, with sheep and cattle and many servants. But there was not enough land there to support all the flocks and herds.
And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle, and the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelt then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and thy herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or, if thou take the right hand, then I will go to the left.
Abram was being more than generous in giving his nephew first choice on where to settle. Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan River, well-watered everywhere. The Bible describes the area as being like the Garden of Eden. But there was one problem with the land: its close proximity to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, unusually wicked places that had sinned greatly against the Lord. But this is what Lot chose. There's always that person who takes, without guilt, the biggest piece of cake. And Lot's decision would later cost him more than he could ever imagine.
And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee.
Then Abram moved to a Palestine city called Hebron, where he pitched his tent in Mamre, an oak grove named after an Amorite, who would later become Abram's ally. He built an altar to the Lord there, the third one listed in Genesis. And it was here where the Lord would later make his covenant with Abram official.